Alright, so now while I'm at work, I'm going to go ahead and knock out that video that everybody's been asking about Zionism and the thing with Israel. Now here's this, right? There's a difference between religious Judaism and political Zionism. If we're talking religious Judaism, then Israel, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, the Jewish people of Israel, are failing God. They might be one of the most secular, open societies in the Middle East, but if you're talking religious Judaism, you're talking about the law of Moses. And the thing with the law of Moses is that certain things were required. For one, the Ark of the Covenant. Now, there's been rumors, claims that I've seen online that the Ark of the Covenant has been discovered, that it was under Golgotha, and that when the spear was driven into the side of Jesus after the earthquake and everything happened, when he gave up his ghost, that his blood came down upon the Ark of the Covenant. It was discovered there in some cave, and this one man was allowed to go back there, but anyone else who was gone towards the Ark has died. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will say this. If you're talking about religious Judaism, and even the Muslims have this correct, God said, as long as you follow my laws and my statutes, I will leave you in. I will bring you into this land of milk and honey, this promised land, and it will be your land, and no one will remove you from it. And now when we come to that issue, because we're talking about religious Judaism, there are laws that are a part of religious Judaism which are not being followed by Israel. And this is where we come into political Zionism. Political Zionism is the idea that because you are of Jewish descent, I'm talking genetics, not religious anything here, that being a biological Jew, a descendant of Abraham, that you are promised this land by God, and that simply by mere genetics, nationality, ethnicity, that is your place, and that Israel is to be established this way. Now, this goes back to the conflict between scripturalist Jews who go by the Tanakh and the Torah, and religious Jews or Zionist Jews who are following a political, ethnic form of Judaism linked towards following the Talmuds and stuff like that. So there's this conflict between the two. Now, at the present moment, the nation of Israel exists. And going into religious Judaism and even Christian prophecy, Israel will exist in the end times. Now, this comes into an interesting question, because as a Christian, I am looking at the nation of Israel, which was created by, edicts and rulings from man and national man-made governments. And Israel, which is acting as a secular government, just like the other governments of Europe and America and such. That you come into this idea that, Israel has to be reborn in the end times for the Antichrist and the false prophet to come through and conquer Israel. And perhaps the reason the Antichrist comes through and conquers Israel is because Israel is not following messianic law, which is the requirement of religious Judaism. Now, this places the whole Middle Eastern thing in a really interesting context, because when you're talking about Muslims, you have Muslims who are devout followers of Sharia law. And then you have what they call Islamist people who are Muslim in name only. They do things which are against Sharia law, and they use the idea that they're Muslims and other Muslims should support them and everything else, even though publicly they appear to be following the very laws and they're trying to enforce those very laws. They're also breaking those very laws. And so you have the same way you have religious Muslims, and then you have political Islamists, is the same way that you have religious Jews, and then you have political Zionists. And so the difference here has to be a matter of, where the political side is simply fulfilling prophecy that was already pointed to by the religious prophets thousands of years ago, and we're seeing man trying to create that prophecy, but in trying to create it, they're still following the very prophecy that was put forth by God through his prophets. So it raises an interesting question about the whole war in the Middle East, because think of it like this: without the political Zionists, there would be no nation of Israel. So the nation of Israel, which was promised by God to the religious Jews who followed his laws, is in existence because of what was created by the political Zionists. So the political Zionists fulfilled God's prophecy even though they're not following it. And this becomes one of those things, God has said, I believe it's in Jeremiah, I might be wrong, that he is a God like no other. He will tell you in the beginning what shall happen in the end. So you have prophets that existed. Isaiah was around. His prophecies were around. He lived 800 years before Jesus Christ was ever born. Then, here becomes the thing. He laid out prophecies that pointed towards what the Messiah must fulfill. And he's not the only one. You have Jeremiah, you have Hosea, you have all of these Jewish prophets hundreds of years before Jesus Christ ever walked the earth. And I had a Muslim, when I was in prison, a Muslim friend of mine, asked me why I was a Christian, and I didn't really give him an answer, but I'm going to give you guys the answer. All right, if you look at Matthew 24 and 25, Matthew 23 is when Jesus publicly called out the Pharisees, which is the root of the Talmudian Jewish sect. And he called them sepulchres, told them they were like tombs, all whitewashed and pretty on the inside and dead, rotten on the inside, but they're all whitewashed and pretty on the outside. And he called them out for being hypocrites and everything else. Now, there's a guy on YouTube, he runs a YouTube channel, Rood Awakening, ROOD, who talks about the Jewish historical and cultural aspects of Jesus Christ and stuff. So it gives you a lot of insight into that, and everything that Jesus did went against the Pharisee Jews, the Talmudian Jews, if you will. So you come to this thing that the Old Testament prophets prophesied these things must happen, and everyone was kind of confused over the prophecies. But when you realize there were two prophecies concerning the Messiah, one was the coming of Jesus Christ as Messiah, where he came quietly. And then there's the other prophecy of the Messiah, where he comes triumphantly with an army of angels. Brings the forces of heaven against Lucifer, the fallen angels, and the evil of this world. In Matthew 24, Jesus is brought before the temple in Israel, and he tells them that not one of these stones will stand upon another before the Son of Man returns. Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Think about that. In fact, I don't have it. I want to get it. There's a book in the Catholic Bible which covers this. It was written during this time. This is also where the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah comes into play. Which is the book of Maccabees, by the way. I think it's in the Apocrypha if you find it. Anyways, within that book, you have stuff about what happened during that time after Jesus and the Romans invaded and destroyed the temple and redrew the borders in Roman maps that everyone used and renamed the land Syria Palestine. which is where you get the word Palestinians from. So the original Palestinians were the Jews. Romans just went in and renamed them. So now you have this thing that the Jews were there. The Jews were Palestinians before the Muslims came in during the Crusades. This is historical fact, and there have always been Jews there. There will always be Jews there. In fact, if you find old encyclopedias, I have some just for this purpose. If you can look up the word, or you can look it up on Google. I think Wikipedia mentions it, which is the word Palestinian Jew. This is what happened before Israel was carved out by the League of Nations. So now you have this whole thing that there's a whole convoluted, conflicted series of events, religious, political, historical, all of them wrapped around this. And this is what is the conflict in the Middle East. This is where it is rooted in, because it is not just a matter of religious Judaism and religious Islam at conflict with each other. In fact, I've had several rabbis and several Muslims tell me that, and several Jews tell me, as a matter of fact, not just rabbis, I've talked to a couple rabbis online that told me they never had any issues with Muslims, and simply because of their religion. So you have religious Muslims and you have religious Jews who have no issues with each other. They believe there's one God and one God only, and they have their law, and these other guys have their law, and whatever they have to do between them is between them. It is a matter of God, of what God has told them. And then you have political Zionists and political Islamists that are conflicting and fighting with each other. But at the meantime, you have religious Jews in Israel and even religious Muslims in Israel who are like, well, according to the law, whether you're talking Sharia or the law of Moses, we shouldn't be having gay rights parades, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be doing this. And so they oppose those things which are permitted by the religious or the political groups. And so, again, even within Israel, there is a conflict about what is proper and what they should be doing in accordance with the law of Moses and what they believe that God has set out before them.